The wine had been flowing for 3 hours, and Lila's laugh had that sharp edge it always got when she'd had too much to drink. Our living room buzzed with the comfortable chatter of couples who'd known each other too long, playing games that had stopped being fun years ago. "Truth or dare?" Monica giggled, pointing her glass at my wife. "Come on, Lila, spill something juicy." I watched from my spot on the couch, nursing my beer and trying to look interested. These game nights had become a monthly torture session, but Lila insisted they were important for her career. Everything was about her career these days. "Truth," Lila said, swirling her wine with theatrical flair. Her eyes found mine across the room, and something cold flickered there. "You want the truth? Fine. If I could turn back time, I'd never marry Garrett." The room went silent except for the hum of our expensive air conditioning unit. Monica's mouth dropped open. Evan Merrick, Lila's golden boy coworker, shifted uncomfortably in his chair. The other couples exchanged glances that screamed awkward, but I just smiled. After 20 years as a journalist before taking over the marina, I'd learned to read people, to wait for the right moment. Tonight was that moment. "Finally," I said, setting down my beer and reaching into my jacket pocket. "Something we can agree on?" I pulled out a manila envelope, thick with papers and photographs. The silence in the room deepened, became something you could cut with a knife. "What's that?" Lila's voice had lost its wine-soaked confidence. "Evidence," I said simply, opening the envelope. "Screenshots, actually. Text messages between you and Evan here. Want me to read them out loud, or should I just pass them around?" Evan's face went pale. Monica leaned forward like a vulture sensing carrion. The other couples suddenly found their drinks fascinating. Before we dive deeper into the story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. I pulled out the first page, holding it up so everyone could see the phone screen capture. "This one's from last Tuesday. Can't wait to feel your hands on me again." "That's you, Lila." And Evan's response. "Your husband's such a loser. You deserve so much better." "Garrett, stop," Lila whispered, but her voice carried no authority now. "Oh, but we're just getting started." I flipped to another page. "Here's a fun one from 3 weeks ago. You two planning your little rendezvous at the seaside motel. Very classy, by the way. Nothing says romance like hourly rates and cigarette burns in the carpet." Evan finally found his voice. "Look, man, this is between you and Lila." "No," I cut him off, standing up slowly. "This stopped being between me and Lila the moment you decided to stick your nose where it didn't belong. The moment both of you decided to make me the punchline of your little joke." I walked over to Monica, who was practically vibrating with excitement. "You want to see something really interesting, Monica? Here's a text where Lila calls you that gossipy cow who'd sell her own mother for a promotion. Apparently, you've been very helpful in covering for her affairs." Monica's face twisted. "What? Lila, you said—" "That's enough." Lila stood up, swaying slightly. "Everyone needs to leave, now." "Actually," I said, settling back into my chair, "that was just the warm-up act. You'll want to stick around for the main event." The room erupted in whispers and shocked murmurs. Evan looked like he wanted to crawl under the coffee table. Lila stood frozen, her perfect mask finally cracking. I had spent 3 months planning this moment, 3 months of careful investigation and evidence gathering, 3 months of watching my wife lie to my face every single day while she destroyed our marriage for a man who wasn't worth the air he breathed. Tonight, the games were finally going to be fair. The morning after our guests fled like rats from a sinking ship, I sat at the marina office watching the sunrise paint the harbor gold. My phone had been buzzing all night with texts I hadn't bothered to read. Lila had locked herself in the bedroom and hadn't come out. "You look like hell," Cap Pritchard said, settling into the chair across from my desk. At 65, Cap still carried himself like the cop he'd been for 30 years before retirement drove him to private investigation work. His weathered face showed concern, but his eyes held satisfaction. "Feel worse than I look," I admitted, but it was worth it. Cap poured coffee from the pot I kept brewing for the fishermen who started their days before dawn. "You sure you want to go through with the rest of this? Last night was just the opening shot." I leaned back in my chair, thinking about the past month of surveillance and evidence gathering. It had started with a feeling, that nagging sense that something was wrong. Lila staying late at the office more often, new clothes I hadn't seen her buy, the way she'd started keeping her phone face down during dinner. "Tell me again what you saw at the seaside," I said. Cap pulled out a small notebook, flipping through pages covered in his careful handwriting. "Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday of last week. Lila's car in the lot from 2 p.m. to 4 p.m. each day, Evan's BMW parked 3 spaces down. I got photos of them going in together, coming out together. Nothing illegal about it, but pretty damning for a marriage. I'd hired Cap 3 weeks ago, when my own amateur detective work had hit a wall. Following your own wife around town was harder than it looked in movies. But Cap had the skills and the patience of a professional. What about Monica's involvement? That's where it gets interesting. Cap flipped to another page. She's been covering for Lila at work, taking calls, making excuses to the boss, but she's also been feeding information back to other people in the office. Classic gossip mill stuff. Monica likes being in the know, likes having power over other people's secrets. I nodded. Monica's weakness for gossip had always been obvious, but I'd underestimated how far she'd go to stay in Lila's inner circle. And the financial stuff? Your wife's been creative with the joint account. Small withdrawals, nothing that would trigger alerts. But it adds up to about $3,000 over the past 2 months. Hotel rooms, fancy dinners, new lingerie from that boutique downtown. The lingerie had been what finally convinced me to hire Cap. I'd found the receipts hidden in Lila's car, items I'd never seen her wear. When I'd asked about them casually, she'd claimed they were gifts for Monica's birthday. But Monica's birthday was in January, and this was September. My phone buzzed with another text. This time I looked. We need to talk. This isn't over. Lila. I showed the message to Cap, who snorted. She's got some nerve. What's your next move? I'd been thinking about that all night. The public humiliation at the game night had felt good, but it wasn't enough. Lila and Evan had spent months making me look like a fool, treating me like an obstacle to be worked around. They'd planned to dismantle my life piece by piece while building their own happiness on the wreckage. I want them to understand what it feels like to lose everything, I said finally. Their jobs, their reputations, their sense of security. I want them to wake up every morning wondering what fresh hell I'm going to rain down on them. Cap closed his notebook and looked at me seriously. That's a dangerous road, Garrett. Revenge has a way of consuming people. Maybe, I said, but some people deserve to be consumed. My computer chimed with an email notification. The sender made me smile for the first time in weeks. Jules Morrison, owner of the Anchor, the dive bar where half the town went to drink and gossip. Heard about your party last night. Stop by when you get a chance. Got some information you might find interesting. Jules. I looked at Cap. Feel like taking a field trip? The Anchor sat at the end of Harbor Street, a weathered building that had been serving fishermen and dock workers for 40 years. Jules had bought it from the original owner's widow and turned it into the unofficial town hall, where rumors were born and reputations went to perish. She was waiting for us at the bar, polishing glasses with the methodical precision of someone who'd been doing it for decades. Jules was 50-something, with silver-streaked hair and the kind of sharp eyes that missed nothing. Well, well, she said as we walked in, if it isn't the man of the hour. Heard you put on quite a show last night. News travels fast, I said, taking a seat at the bar. Honey, news around here travels faster than gossip, and gossip travels at light speed. Jules set down the glass and leaned forward conspiratorially. Your wife and her boyfriend have been regulars here for the past month, always sitting in that corner booth, always whispering like they were planning world domination. Cap and I exchanged glances. What kind of whispering? The kind where they kept mentioning your name and not in a nice way. Jules poured 3 cups of coffee without being asked. Last week, I heard them talking about your job at the marina. Something about getting you fired so you'd have to sell the house. The coffee turned bitter in my mouth. They were planning to sabotage my job? That's what it sounded like. Evan was bragging about having connections at the Harbor Authority, people who could make trouble for you. Lila was eating it up, talking about how you'd never see it coming. I felt something cold and sharp settle in my chest. It was one thing for them to have an affair. It was another thing entirely for them to plot the destruction of everything I'd worked to build. There's more, Jules continued. Monica was here Friday night, 3 sheets to the wind, running her mouth about how Lila was going to upgrade her whole life. Apparently your wife's been planning this exit strategy for months. Cap made notes while Jules talked. The picture she painted was worse than I'd imagined. Lila and Evan hadn't just been having an affair. They'd been systematically planning to destroy my life so they could start their own without any inconvenient obstacles. What else did Monica say? I asked. She mentioned something about Lila having dirt on you, some secret she was planning to use if you made trouble during the divorce. Jules refilled my coffee cup. Any idea what that might be? I thought for a moment, then laughed. Probably the DUI from college, or maybe the time I got fired from the newspaper for arguing with the editor. Nothing that would surprise anyone who knows me. Good, Cap said. That means she's got nothing real to hold over you. We spent another hour at the Anchor, with Jules providing a detailed account of everything she'd observed over the past month. By the time we left, I had a clear picture of just how thoroughly Lila and Evan had betrayed me, but I also had something else, a plan. As we walked back to the marina, Cap asked, "So what's next?" I pulled out my phone and scrolled through the contacts until I found the number I wanted. Next, we start returning the favor. Time to show them what it feels like when someone else is pulling the strings. The phone rang twice before a familiar voice answered. Harbor Authority. This is Jim. Jim, it's Garrett from the marina. I've got some information you might find interesting about irregularities in the harbor inspection reports. The game was just getting started. Monday morning brought gray skies and the smell of rain, perfect weather for what I had planned. I stood at my office window, watching Lila's car pull out of our driveway 20 minutes later than usual. She'd spent the weekend avoiding me, sleeping in the guest room and communicating through terse notes left on the kitchen counter. My phone buzzed with a text from Cap. Package delivered. She'll find it when she gets to work. The package was a manila envelope containing copies of all the evidence we'd gathered, along with a few additional surprises. But it wasn't going to Lila. It was going to her boss, Ms. Atwood, with a cover letter explaining how Lila had been using company time and resources for personal affairs. Garrett? The voice behind me belonged to Tommy Chen, one of my dock workers. There's someone here to see you. I turned to find Monica standing in my doorway, looking like she hadn't slept in days. Her usually perfect hair was disheveled, and her makeup couldn't quite hide the dark circles under her eyes. We need to talk, she said without preamble. I gestured to the chair across from my desk. By all means. Monica sat down, clutching her purse like a life preserver. What you did Saturday night, that was cruel. Was it? I leaned back in my chair. I thought it was honest. Maybe the first honest conversation we'd had in months. Lila's my friend. Lila thinks you're a gossipy cow. I opened my desk drawer and pulled out a printed text message. Her words, not mine. Want to see the screenshot? Monica's face crumpled. She was just angry when she said that. She said it 3 weeks ago, Monica, long before Saturday night, long before I knew about any of this. I set the paper on the desk between us. Face it, you were never her friend. You were her accomplice. I never meant for it to go this far, Monica whispered, but you knew what was happening. You covered for her, lied to her boss, helped her sneak around behind my back. I stood up and walked to the window. The question is, what are you going to do about it now? Monica was quiet for a long moment. When she finally spoke, her voice was small and defeated. What do you want from me? The truth? All of it. Everything you know about their plan to sabotage my job, everything about what Lila's been saying about me, everything about how long this has been going on. And if I tell you? Then maybe I won't include you in the next phase of my little campaign. I turned back to face her. But if you keep protecting her, if you keep lying for her, then you'll go down with the ship. Monica opened her purse and pulled out her phone. It started 4 months ago. Lila met Evan at a company retreat in Portland. She came back talking about how charming he was, how ambitious, how different from you. Different how? Younger, more successful, going places. Monica scrolled through her phone. She said you'd gotten comfortable, that you weren't the man she married anymore. I felt a familiar anger building in my chest, but I kept my voice level. What about the plan to get me fired? That was Evan's idea. He has a cousin who works for the Harbor Authority, someone who could make trouble for your operating license. They were going to file complaints about safety violations, environmental issues, anything that would trigger an investigation. And then? Then you'd lose the marina, have to sell the house to pay legal fees, and Lila would get half of everything in the divorce. Monica looked up from her phone. She was going to leave you with nothing. I walked back to my desk and sat down, processing this information. What else? There's a recording, Monica said quietly. Lila made a voice memo on her phone, practicing what she was going to say to the divorce lawyer. She talks about claiming you were abusive, that she was afraid of you. That's a lie. I know, but she said it would help her get a better settlement, maybe even get a restraining order so you couldn't contest the divorce. I felt something inside me shift, a cold calculation replacing the hot anger. I want that recording. I can't. Yes, you can. Because if you don't, I'm going to make sure everyone knows about your role in this. Your boss, your friends, your family. I'll make sure the whole town knows that Monica Walsh is the kind of person who helps married women destroy their husbands. Monica's hand shook as she continued scrolling through her phone. She sent it to me last week, asked me to listen and tell her if it sounded convincing. She turned the phone toward me and pressed play. Lila's voice filled the small office, cold and calculating as she rehearsed her lies. I've been afraid to leave him for years. He has a terrible temper, and he's been drinking more lately. Last week he grabbed my arm so hard it left bruises. I listened to 3 minutes of fabricated abuse stories, each one more elaborate than the last. When it finished, the office was silent, except for the sound of rain beginning to fall outside. Send it to me, I said. Garrett, I can't... Send it to me, or I'll make sure this recording finds its way to the police, along with evidence that you helped her fabricate these claims. I leaned forward. Do you know what happens to people who file false police reports, Monica? What happens to people who help them do it? Monica's fingers moved over her phone screen. A moment later, my phone chimed with an incoming message. There, she said. Are we done? Not quite. I saved the recording to my phone and then to my computer. I want you to call Lila right now. Tell her you're worried about her, that you think she should come clean before this gets worse. Why? Because I want to see what she says when she thinks she still has a friend in her corner. I smiled, and Monica flinched. Make the call, Monica. Unless you'd prefer to explain to everyone why you helped your best friend plan to frame her husband for domestic violence. Monica dialed Lila's number with shaking fingers. The phone rang 4 times before Lila answered. Monica, thank God. I've been trying to reach you all weekend. Lila, we need to talk. This thing with Garrett, it's getting out of hand. He's lost his mind. Lila's voice was sharp with anger. The things he said Saturday night, the way he humiliated me in front of everyone. I'm going to make him pay for that. Maybe you should just come clean. Tell him you're sorry. Sorry? Lila laughed, a sound like breaking glass. I'm not sorry. I'm sorry I wasted 15 years of my life with that loser. I'm sorry I didn't leave him sooner. Monica looked at me helplessly. I gestured for her to keep going. But the recording, Lila. Those things you said about him being abusive, that's not true. It doesn't matter if it's true. It matters if people believe it. Lila's voice turned cold. And after Saturday night, after the way he acted, people will believe it. I held up my phone, showing Monica that I was recording the conversation. Her eyes went wide. Lila, I don't think... Don't think, Monica. That's always been your problem. Just do what I tell you, like you always have. There was a pause. I have to go. Evan's here, and we have plans to make. The line went quiet. Monica stared at her phone like it had turned into a snake. She doesn't care about you, I said gently. She never did. You were just useful to her. Monica started crying, quiet tears that she wiped away with the back of her hand. I never wanted anyone to get hurt. But someone was always going to get hurt, Monica. The only question was who. I stood up and walked to the door. You can see yourself out. And Monica, if you warn her about any of this, I'll make sure the recording of this phone call finds its way to her boss along with everything else. After Monica left, I sat alone in my office, listening to the rain and planning my next move. Lila had just handed me everything I needed to destroy her credibility, her career, and her relationship with Evan. But I wasn't done yet, not even close. My phone buzzed with a text from Cap. Evan's car is in the shop. Seems someone poured sugar in his gas tank. Terrible shame. I smiled and typed back, What a coincidence. Any idea who might have done such a thing? None whatsoever. But I did notice he'll be taking the bus to work for the next week. Perfect. Phase 2 was about to begin. The town's annual Harbor Festival was in full swing by the time I arrived at the boardwalk Thursday evening. Families wandered between game booths and food trucks while teenagers clustered around the rides, their laughter mixing with the sound of carnival music and crashing waves. I found Cap near the ring toss, watching the crowd with the practiced eye of someone who'd spent decades reading people's intentions. She's here, he said without turning around. Showed up 20 minutes ago with Evan. They're trying to act normal, but everyone's staring. I followed his gaze and spotted Lila near the funnel cake stand, wearing a blue dress I'd bought her for our anniversary 2 years ago. The irony wasn't lost on me. Evan stood beside her, his usual confident posture replaced by nervous fidgeting. How'd the office visit go? Cap asked. Better than expected. I'd spent Tuesday morning at Lila's workplace, delivering a flash drive to Ms. Atwood that contained not just evidence of Lila's affair, but proof that she'd been stealing Monica's ideas and presenting them as her own. Turns out Lila's been taking credit for other people's work for months. Her boss was very interested to learn the truth. And Monica? Sang like a canary once she realized Lila had been using her. I watched as a group of women approached Lila, their body language making it clear the conversation wasn't friendly. Word travels fast in a small town. The confrontation I'd been expecting came sooner than anticipated. Lila spotted me near the duck pond game and marched over, her face flushed with anger and embarrassment. "You son of a—" she started, then caught herself as several families turned to stare. "We need to talk. Now." "I'm listening," I said calmly. "Not here. Somewhere private." "No, I think here is perfect." I gestured to the growing crowd of onlookers. "After all, you didn't seem to mind having an audience Saturday night when you announced you wished you'd never married me?" Lila's eyes darted around at the faces watching us. "That was different. I was upset." "You were honest," I interrupted, maybe for the first time in months. "So let's keep being honest, Lila. Tell everyone here about your boyfriend." "Garrett, stop. Tell them about how you've been planning to frame me for domestic violence to get a better divorce settlement." The crowd pressed closer, sensing drama. I saw Jules from the anchor pushing through the group, her phone already recording. "Tell them about how you and Evan planned to sabotage my business so I'd lose everything." "That's not true." But Lila's voice cracked, and everyone could hear the lie. Evan finally stepped forward, trying to salvage the situation. "Look, man, this is between you and your wife." "My wife?" I laughed. "Is that what you call her when you're together at the seaside motel? Because I have photos of you two coming and going from room 237. Want me to share them with everyone?" Evan's face went pale. "You're crazy." "Am I?" I pulled out my phone and held it up so the crowd could see the screen. "This is a recording of Lila practicing her lies for the divorce lawyer. Want to hear it?" "No!" Lila lunged for my phone, but I stepped back and she stumbled, nearly falling. The crowd gasped. "Careful, Lila," I said loudly. "People might think you're the one with the temper problem." That's when Evan made his mistake. Whether it was chivalry or stupidity, he decided to play the hero. He stepped between Lila and me, puffing out his chest like he was going to intimidate me. "Back off," he said, his voice trying for menacing but landing somewhere around petulant. "Leave her alone." I looked him up and down, taking in his expensive clothes and soft hands. "Or what? Or I'll make you back off." The crowd had formed a complete circle now, phones recording from every angle. I could see the anticipation on their faces, the hunger for drama that small-town life rarely provided. "Go ahead," I said. "Take your best shot." Evan hesitated, probably realizing for the first time that threatening someone and following through were two different things. But he was committed now, with dozens of people watching and recording. He took a swing at me, telegraphing the punch so obviously that I had time to step aside, grab his wrist, and use his own momentum to send him stumbling toward the duck pond game. He crashed into the booth, sending plastic ducks flying and soaking himself with the chlorinated water. The crowd erupted in laughter and applause. Phones flashed as people captured Evan's humiliation from every possible angle. "Evan!" Lila rushed to help him up, but he was too embarrassed to accept her assistance. He pushed her away and tried to stand on his own, slipping on the wet pavement and falling again. "Ladies and gentlemen," I announced to the crowd, "I present to you Evan Merrick, the man who thinks he's an upgrade from me." More laughter. Someone in the crowd shouted, "Do it again!" Another voice called out, "World Star!" Lila finally managed to help Evan to his feet, but the damage was done. His expensive shirt was soaked and stained, his hair plastered to his head, and his dignity was somewhere at the bottom of the duck pond. "This isn't over," Lila hissed at me as she supported Evan's weight. "You're right," I said. "It's not." I watched them stumble away through the crowd, Evan dripping and Lila trying to maintain some shred of dignity. The onlookers gradually dispersed, but I could hear them talking excitedly about what they'd just witnessed. Jules appeared at my elbow, grinning like she'd just won the lottery. "Well, that was entertaining. You know this is going to be all over social media in about 5 minutes, right?" "I'm counting on it," I said. My phone was already buzzing with notifications as people tagged me in videos and photos of the confrontation. By morning, everyone in town would know exactly what had happened. But more importantly, everyone would know that Lila and Evan weren't the victims they were trying to pretend to be. Cap joined us, shaking his head with amusement. "That boy's got no idea what he's gotten himself into, does he?" "None whatsoever," I agreed. "But he's about to learn." As we walked away from the scene, I felt a satisfaction I hadn't experienced in months. For too long, I'd been the one being manipulated, the one being lied to, the one being made to look like a fool. Tonight, the tables had finally turned. My phone rang, and I glanced at the screen. Unknown number. "Hello? Is this Garrett Harlan?" The voice was female, professional. "Speaking." This is Carrie Walsh from Channel 8 News. We've received some videos from the Harbor Festival tonight, and we'd like to interview you about your marital situation. I looked at Cap, who was listening with interest. What kind of interview? We're doing a story about public confrontations and social media, how private disputes become public entertainment. Would you be willing to share your side of the story? I thought about it for exactly 3 seconds. Absolutely. When would you like to meet? As I scheduled the interview for tomorrow morning, I realized that Lila and Evan had just handed me the biggest platform I could have asked for. By the time I was done telling my story to the local news, everyone in the county would know the truth about their affair and their plans to destroy my life. The festival continued around us, families enjoying their evening, but I was already thinking about tomorrow, about the interview, about the next phase of my plan, about how thoroughly I was going to dismantle everything Lila and Evan thought they'd built. They wanted to play games with my life? Fine. But they were about to learn that I was much better at games than they were. Friday morning's news interview went better than I could have hoped. Carrie Walsh was a thorough journalist who'd done her homework, and when I played the recording of Lila planning to fabricate abuse claims, even the camera crew looked shocked. So, you're saying your wife was planning to file false domestic violence charges? Carrie asked. That's exactly what I'm saying, and I have the evidence to prove it. I'd brought copies of everything. The text messages, the photos from the motel, Monica's statement about the fake abuse story. This isn't just about an affair. This is about two people who were willing to destroy an innocent person's life for their own convenience. By noon, the story was trending on social media. The local Facebook groups were buzzing with commentary, most of it supportive of me and damning of Lila and Evan. The video of Evan falling into the duck pond had been shared hundreds of times, often with mocking captions. I was at the Anchor, celebrating with Cap and Jules when my phone rang. Lila's number. Don't answer it, Jules advised. Let her stew. But I was curious. Lila? You bastard. Her voice was raw with fury. You've destroyed everything. Everything. Have I? Or did I just tell the truth? Ms. Atwood fired me this morning. Fired me. Because of your lies. Not lies, Lila. Facts, documents, recordings, your own words. I put the phone on speaker so Cap and Jules could hear. How does it feel to face consequences for your actions? This isn't over, Garrett. I'll make you pay for this. With what? Your job's gone, your reputation's destroyed, and your boyfriend is too busy being a laughingstock to help you. I took a sip of my beer. What exactly are you going to do to me? There was silence on the line, then the sound of sobbing. Why are you doing this to me? Because you did it to me first. The difference is, I'm using the truth. The line went quiet. A moment later, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. We need to meet. Tonight. The old pier. Come alone. I showed the message to Cap, who frowned. That's either desperation or stupidity. With Evan, probably both. I typed back, 8 p.m., and I won't be alone. The old pier jutted out into the harbor like a broken finger, its weathered planks creaking under the weight of decades. It had been abandoned for years, considered too dangerous for public use, but it was still standing. I arrived at 7:45 with Cap, positioning ourselves where we could see anyone approaching. The sun was setting behind the mountains, painting the sky in shades of orange and red. Lila and Evan appeared at exactly 8 o'clock, walking hand in hand like they were going to a romantic dinner instead of a confrontation. They stopped when they saw Cap. I said, come alone, Evan called out. And I said I wouldn't, I replied. What do you want? They approached cautiously, Lila's eyes red from crying, Evan trying to project confidence he clearly didn't feel. We want to make a deal, Lila said. What kind of deal? You stop this campaign against us, take down the social media posts, call the news station, and tell them you lied. Lila's voice was steadier now, like she'd been practicing. In exchange, we'll disappear. Leave town, start over somewhere else. I looked at Cap, who was trying not to laugh. That's your offer? You'll go away if I let you destroy my reputation? It's better than what you deserve, Evan said, finding his voice. After what you did to us. What I did to you. I stepped closer, and Evan instinctively backed up. What I did was expose the truth. You two are the ones who were lying, cheating, and planning to frame me for crimes I didn't commit. That recording was taken out of context, Lila said desperately. Was it? Which part? The part where you practiced lying about me being abusive? Or the part where you talked about getting a restraining order based on those lies? Lila's composure cracked. I never would have gone through with it. But you thought about it. You planned it. You recorded yourself rehearsing it. I pulled out my phone. Want to hear it again? I can play it right now. Stop, she whispered. You want me to stop? Fine. Here's my counteroffer. I looked between them, enjoying the fear in their eyes. You both leave town, like you suggested. You never contact me again, never mention my name, never come back. And in exchange, I won't press charges for the conspiracy to file false police reports. You can't prove... Evan started. I can prove everything. Monica gave me a full statement about her role in your little scheme. The police are very interested in prosecuting false domestic violence claims. I smiled. Apparently it's becoming a real problem. Lila grabbed Evan's arm. We should go. This was a mistake. But Evan wasn't ready to give up. You think you've won? You think destroying our lives makes you some kind of hero? I think it makes us even, I said. You tried to destroy mine first. You never deserved her. Evan's mask finally slipped completely. You're a nobody, a small-town loser with no ambition, no future. Lila was wasted on you. Maybe, I agreed. But at least I'm not the kind of man who helps a married woman plan to frame her husband for domestic violence. At least I'm not the kind of man who falls into a duck pond in front of half the town. Evan's face flushed red. You sucker punched me. I stepped aside and let your own stupidity do the work. I looked at Lila, who was staring at the pier planks like they held the secrets of the universe. Is this really the upgrade you were looking for? This coward who can't even throw a punch without falling down? Shut up! Evan snarled and took a step toward me. Cap moved forward slightly, just enough to remind everyone that he was there. Evan noticed and stopped. Here's what's going to happen, I said. You're both going to leave town, just like you offered. But you're going to do it because you're ashamed and humiliated, not because we made some deal. You're going to do it because everyone knows what you are now, and you can't stand the judgment. Garrett, Lila started. I'm not finished. I looked directly at her. You're going to leave, and you're going to remember every day for the rest of your life that you had a good man who loved you, and you threw it away for this pathetic excuse for a human being. You're going to remember that when you tried to destroy me, I fought back with the truth, and the truth was stronger than all your lies. Lila started crying again, quiet tears that she didn't bother to wipe away. And you, I turned to Evan, are going to remember that you're not half as smart or tough as you thought you were. You're going to remember that when you tried to intimidate me, I made you look like a fool in front of the entire town. Evan opened his mouth to respond, but Cap spoke first. I'd quit while you're behind, son. You're not winning this argument. The four of us stood there in the growing darkness, the only sound the lapping of waves against the pier supports. Finally, Lila pulled on Evan's arm. Come on, she said. Let's go. They turned and walked away, their footsteps echoing on the wooden planks. I watched until they disappeared into the shadows, then looked at Cap. Think they'll actually leave town? Oh, they'll leave, Cap said with certainty. They don't have a choice. Everyone knows their story now, and small towns have long memories. We walked back toward the marina, past the festival grounds where workers were breaking down the booths and rides. The carnival was over, and life was returning to normal. But normal for me would be different now. Better. I'd learned something important about myself over the past week. I was stronger than I'd thought, smarter than my enemies had assumed, and more capable of fighting back than anyone had imagined. My phone buzzed with a text from Jules. Heard about the pier meeting. Everything okay? I typed back. Everything's perfect. See you tomorrow for the celebration. As Cap and I reached our cars, he turned to me with a serious expression. You know this isn't really over, right? Revenge has a way of echoing back. Maybe, I said, but some things are worth the risk. I drove home through the quiet streets, past the houses where my neighbors were settling in for the evening. Tomorrow, I'd start the process of rebuilding my life, of figuring out what came next. But tonight, I was content to savor the victory. Lila had said if she could turn back time, she'd never marry me. Well, she'd gotten her wish. Our marriage was over, destroyed by her own choices and actions. If I could turn back time, would I change anything? Would I try to save our marriage, fight for a woman who'd been planning to destroy me? No, I wouldn't change a thing. Some people deserve the consequences of their actions, and some fights are worth having. This had been both. Epilogue. 3 months later, I was sitting at the Anchor with Cap and Jules, celebrating the news that the Harbor Authority had not only renewed my marina license, but had commended me for my cooperation during their investigation of Evan's cousin, who'd been taking bribes to overlook safety violations at other facilities. Heard from Monica lately? Jules asked, refilling my beer. She sent a postcard from Portland, got a new job, says she's done with office politics. I took a sip of the cold beer. Apparently she learned something from all this. What about the happy couple? Last I heard, they made it to California before Evan's credit cards got maxed out. Turns out he'd been living beyond his means for years. I shrugged. Lila's working at a department store in Sacramento. Monica heard it through the gossip network. Cap chuckled. Karma's got a sense of humor. The door chimed, and Carrie Walsh from Channel 8 walked in. She'd become something of a regular since our interview, often stopping by to check on how I was doing. "Garrett, heard the good news about your license renewal." She sat down at our table. "Any interest in doing a follow-up interview? Local man rebuilds after public betrayal kind of thing?" "Thanks, but I think I've had enough publicity for one lifetime." I raised my glass. Some stories are better left finished. As the evening wound down and my friends headed home to their families, I walked out onto the pier behind the anchor and looked out at the harbor. The water was calm, reflecting the lights from the marina and the distant mountains. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Saw you on the news. Glad you're doing well." I stared at the message for a long moment, then deleted it without responding. Some conversations were over, and some chapters of life were meant to stay closed. The night air was cool and clean, carrying the salt smell of the ocean and the promise of tomorrow. I had work to do, a business to run, and a life to live. And for the first time in months, that life was entirely my own. If I could turn back time, I wouldn't change a thing.